Okay, there we are.
Hopefully we'll be non-glitchy.
Oh, much better, much better. Thank you, thank you. Okay, sorry to interrupt you.
It's really tough when you have a good thought and you only get half the words, huh? And maybe I should just pretend like I filled them all in with something smarter, right? Like, like the Mad Libs, we'll just take the words that are missing and fill them in with something absolutely brilliant and earth-shattering, hopefully. I guess that's probably a really good point. Laugh often. Um, when you're doing something different, people aren't going to know what to expect. And so humor for me has always been really good medicine. And I've been in some really tough situations, which means being under the microscope and sometimes, like drop kicked to a press conference or something like that. I try not to listen to a lot of it, like really pretty honestly, but sometimes even I get sucked into the comments, which should never happen. Nothing that anybody has to attach a name that is not like government issued in some way should be able to affect your mentality, but it's pretty hard not to at times. And I remember I first got, in women's football, we didn't get that as much because nobody paid attention. Okay. We won gold medals. Nobody even knew we existed. Okay. So we would have been like, oh my God, give me a troll, like a troll doll, like an internet troll. That means somebody's watching. So I hadn't really gotten that training. We had to pay to represent the USA. So if that gives you any idea, right? Guys complain about $50,000 for the Pro Bowl and we had to pay to represent the USA. So it was a lot different world. All of a sudden I go into men's pro football and it's the #1 story in the country. And I'm not there as a kicker and I'm not there as a coach. I am there literally getting tackled by guys on every play. There's no other way to put it. No one gave a darn about women playing football, or I should say women in football, until I was literally willing to get tackled by men. And that changed the whole conversation because all of a sudden it became the #1 story in the country and people start going, oh my gosh, there are women in football? Like, where did this happen? Where did this come from, right? And I remember one of my clients, I was a trainer by day. And so I used to tell them they got me way cheaper than therapy because, my psych rates were much higher than my personal training rates, but I think they kept me as sane as anything. And one of my clients messaged me and she's like, I'm sorry, I just couldn't resist. Couldn't resist what? And so I click on it and it's a comment by an internet troll, which says she's gonna get hit and die and or get pregnant. And her comment was, here's hoping you're sterile. And I just remembered I was by myself and it was so terrible and so ridiculous that I bust out laughing hysterically alone, right? And then I realized, I'm like, it's pretty much as bad as it could get, right? I can't imagine anything that they could say beyond this that would beat immaculate conception and death, right? All at once. And so all of a sudden I have this media car wash with no training. Nobody ever trained me because again, we were begging for like a junior journalist from the high school paper to come cover our games in women's football. So all of a sudden I'm like thrust in the spotlight. I have the whole media car wash. Everybody wants to talk to me. And of course they're like, that they want to be salacious and they want the like, oh, well, how do some people feel? And I just decided I would jump the whole thing and take over the conversation. I'm not going to let them drive it. I'm going to be like, hey, so you guys, I have the best story for you. So I got this internet troll and he commented that I was going to die and or get pregnant. And I thought to myself, I was one of the best linebackers in the world for a really long time. And I did not know it was possible to hit somebody so hard that they could cause immaculate conception and death. And it was so funny because reporter after reporter after reporter was like, okay, I don't think that we can get any deeper than that. Can you tell us something else? Right? They're like, oh my gosh, we're waiting for this controversial moment of this woman and everybody hates it or whatever it is. And you beat them to the punch, and then they kind of got nice because whatever you read could not beat that. And they would be like, oh man, you saw that? And I'm like, yeah. And my client was great. She was just hoping that the guy was sterile, because obviously if he was going to be so bold as to be the one to say it, we were hoping that he was not perpetuating that. And I learned from that just how much, like, in these ridiculous situations, sometimes humor can be your best ally. And it also allows you this wonderful tool of clarification. So having been, the oddity or the one woman in a whole lot of conversations many times, there have been so many times that I knew somebody said something and it just came out wrong. I mean, we've all done it, right? The second we uttered words, we were like, no, come back, right? Like, bring them back. It was not what I meant to do. That combination, no, right? We've all had that moment. And so I realized that moment can either be a fight or it can be funny. And I give everybody one kind of gimme, right? Like, one time that they can cross that line, that I'm just going to assume that there was a good thought up here. It sounded really good at first. It was on point. But then by the time it came out here, something went terribly wrong. And so this is a really good gift for those situations. Are y'all ready? Phrase works every time. You do realize you said that out loud, right? Because the truth is this: most of the time when somebody did that moment where they wish they could get the words back, they didn't mean it, right? Like, not intentionally. And so they really do kind of wish that they had not said that out loud. So you're able to kind of course correct without freaking out, right? And they'll be like, oh, I mean, that's not what I meant. I know. Look, we're good here in the circle of trust. But I'm gonna coach you up on something. That combination of words, never again. Never again. Don't ever let anybody hear that come out of your mouth ever again. Because here's what will happen, right? And then you become this authority on whether it's, a woman walking in a man's shoes or something like that. And when they know that you're not just going to automatically go to freak out mode, there's a whole lot more conversation and like building that can happen from that point. And one of the things I realized too is, those moments on the playground when you were a little kid, and if the guy liked you, he would like pull your pigtails, like they'd mess with you, they'd kind of joke with you. They still do that. That never goes away. So if they're joking with you and like messing with you and all of that stuff, it's actually because they're trying to see if you're cool. And they probably think you are because they joke with their buddies like that. And when you can laugh and kind of hang with it and like give it back, they're like, oh, okay, we're going to be okay. So humor has been something that has been a big part of my journey, whether it's, laughing at a situation, and often it's laughing at myself, right? Trying not to take myself so seriously that there is a paralysis by analysis. Because when you're doing something that has never been done, which I have now done time after time after time, that means that there's no roadmap to follow. There's no best practices. There's no authority on leadership. There's nobody that you can look at and say, I want to do it like she did. So you have to realize that at times you're going to faceplant. You are going to not get what you wanted. You are going to fall down, and you just hope that you failed forward. So the next time you don't make the same mistake again. Doesn't mean you don't make a mistake, but you try not to replicate the exact same mistake in the same way again. And if you're doing that, then you're learning. But that's also a part of kind of my philosophy, in that I've done things that were way bigger than I could have ever aspired, because there was no one I could look at and say, I want to do that, or I'm going to be her, or I'm going to make that possible. So if I would have just set my sights somewhere, I would have set them way too low. And that's why I tell people, sometimes I feel like God has put blinders on me. You know how like the horses have blinders at the track? Because if I would have seen how high I could go, I might get blinded by the lights, right? Like if that's all it was, I might have seen it and then like tripped and fallen over my own feet, right? Which was, by the way, my biggest nightmare when I was like running onto the NFL field for the first time was like run out and be like, yeah, this is so great, woman in football for the first time, face plant. First female coach, face plant on the NFL sidelines. Like, I mean, those are real things, right? Like that could be really like just human, and we all have those worries. But I do a lot of the times think that the blinders that I've had have kept my head down, just doing the work and being willing to take that next stair step, right? Not necessarily like have to run the whole stadium, but like, okay, here's the next stair step. What does that look like? What do I have to do? And let me get through it. And then the next stair step, and hopefully building one after the next. And that way it's not like you've succeeded or failed, because you're still moving, right? Some days you will feel like you can jump tall buildings in a single bound. Some days you will run a marathon. Other days you will feel like the very best that you've got in your entire being is to shuffle in slippers, right? And shuffle in slippers is real, man. Like you can't pick up your feet, because then the slipper will get all bunchy and like then you're like tripping. But like that slipper day might be your most important day. It might be the day that you kind of don't make it far from the couch. I had many of those days after big games, right? I'm 5'2". I played like I was 6'10", which means, there were days I couldn't move. But that recovery was as important for me being able to go hard on other days as like the days when I was full speed. Because you will not be full speed all the time. And things will come in your way. They will shock you to your core. They will make you think, what the heck am I doing? And you have to be able to look at it and say, And I think if things had been clear for me throughout my career, I might not be capable of having that mentality. But now I don't really know it any other way, right? Like a good example to me is, I've done a lot of trying to be present during this time, because it's such a hard time for everybody, right? And it's a hard time for me too. People don't realize that, but I wasn't $1 million athlete that got paid all this money. Everything that I've done has been self-made from a place where everybody said, oh, well, women don't do that, or girls don't do that. At every point, I have been making the case for it to be some different way, whether it was, first female to play running back in men's pro football. Okay, well, I didn't die, so that was good. Impressed the head coach so much, he asked me to coach the team the next year, right? Then went to the Cardinals from there, then, fielded the Australian women's national team, then founded Gridiron Girls because nobody was teaching the girls, right? And then even like publishing my book is a great example. When you go higher, you see more problems, or you see more areas that need work, right? Like when you're down, like you're like, okay, this is what it is. Like if I could just get here, then like that's it. But it's like you break through and like you break this glass ceiling and you're like, oh no, it's not pretty up here either, right? Like it's what? Oh my gosh, what am I doing now? Right? Like when I went to publish my book, it got turned down by every publisher, everyone. And they said, well, women in football doesn't sell. Pretty sure I was the first. So how many times have you tried? Oh, never? Okay. But That's what it means to be first. It means every time you're doing something, you are hitting a barrier, whether it's, physical, like getting tackled, or it's somebody's mental barrier, because so many of us are programmed to stay in the comfort zone, which means perpetuate doing what we've always been doing, right? We're looking to a roadmap for success that we can follow, but when you're first, there's no roadmap, so no one else can follow it either with respect to you, right? Like, I see opportunities and doors opening all over for women and girls in football now, but a lot of that is a lot of work that has happened. And yet, if you weren't in the trenches the whole time, you're like, okay, this is just what it's supposed to be, right? That's like that rookie who gets smacked in the back of the helmet because the situation that they got was way different than the one that we got. And yet, at the same time, some things don't move nearly as fast as you'd like them to. Another great example of that is, working in the video game space. So for me, what I realized is that football fundamentally suffers, like many areas of society, but football particularly, suffers from sins of omission, which means we don't have to tell you that you don't belong. You see that reinforced in Friday Night Tykes. You see that reinforced in the football commercials. You see that reinforced in the video games. You see that reinforced in college or the pros. You might see a girl somewhere, but the overall message is that it's not for girls. And if you're there, you're an exception to the rule. You're not there to rule, right? It's not your place. They may have let you in the door, but yeah, or there's something wrong with her because of that. No. Okay, so where can we change the conversation? So then we have to look at all levels that we can change the socialization and change the conversation. So yes, that was the book part of that. That was the girls' camps, because I knew that 5 out of 10 girls drop out of sports at puberty. And when surveyed, 7 out of 10 of those girls said society doesn't support them in sports. They feel like they don't belong in sports, and there are not enough visible female role models in sports. Okay? So then we look at, why are there no national movements for girls in football? Hence Gridiron Girls. And when I started it 2.5 years ago, everybody said it won't work. Girls don't want to play football. No, girls have never had the opportunity to decide if they want to play football or not. They may not want to play. That's okay. But we don't get to make that decision for them before they ever get to catch a football. There's a big difference between that. That's why I always say, for me, it's confidence through football and teaching the girls there's no game they cannot play and no field they do not belong in or on. Okay? You getting on that field, if you get out there and you're like, it was cool, but I don't want to do it, that's cool, because you got to decide it. Somebody else saying that you don't have a right to walk on that field, that's not cool. And so that was a big call to action to me. Then from the Gridiron Girls camps, I got outreach from a video game development company in Israel called Toya. And Toya is an all-female development team that does Minecraft worlds. And those Minecraft worlds are all based around strong, powerful women. And they came to me, they loved my football camps and wanted to do Minecraft worlds about Coach Jen. And at first I was like, well, what, I'm trying to get the girls active. And then they said something. Half of gamers are girls, and very few games have female protagonists. Got it. Different game, same problem, same game. And we could address it in 2 ways, right? Both the socialization of girls, being able to play that video game, see a female coach, see themselves in the game, and also have a female protagonist in the game. Yes, I would love to do it. No brainer, easy. From the Toya games, I got introduced to Madden. When I was talking to some of the guys at Madden, I actually met Mike and Robin, who were the director and producer of Story Mode, and I was teaching them zone coverage over pizza. It's a real thing. And they were so impressed. They said, well, coach, could you come in and like kind of work with some of our team on football, because we have coaches sometimes, and I feel like our team gets more confused than they do actually like getting better by having those coaches in there. And I started laughing. I was like, oh, I know a lot of those coaches. No problem. Yes, I can make it easy. I've been teaching people from the ground up in football my whole career. I'm not just focused on the upper echelon, right? Like we had to, as women in football, learn all levels because we were dealing with people who literally had never played before. So our depth of knowledge from the ground up is probably more fluid than some people who have forgotten more than some people know. You know, that old adage, you've forgotten, which just means you're out of touch with how to teach it to people. That's all that means, right? That you're not able to bring somebody into your mind. That's all that means. In psychology, we say that it is a very beautiful talent to be able to take a complex thing and bring it into teaching terms that anyone can digest, right? That is not an easy skill. And it's one that people often kind of like set aside. And yet me, for somebody whose foundation is in play and drawing therapy and those kinds of mechanisms, and actually pitched the need for the integration between drawing therapy and play therapy with sports psychology when I was getting my master's, I don't take that lightly. But by going into Madden and impressing the guys, I ended up getting cast as the reporter in the story mode, because they had written this character for a reporter who, you know, by all standards, she's not a great reporter, right? She had opinions and she was like, you know, I know football and like all this. And they were like, we think you'd be perfect. Could you do that? I'm like, yeah, you think? So I got cast, but I was cast not as myself. And they loved that I was in the game, especially after I came and consulted with everybody and was helping me make Madden more approachable. And they were like, we feel like it's cool that you're in it, but you're in it and you're not you. Like that's terrible. And so it ended up being that people internally on Madden, when they had the opportunity with Superstar KO mode, made a push to have me be the first female head coach in Madden. And that to me was so powerful, because not only could anybody see that a head coach could be a female, right? That's a really, really powerful visibility and presence thing, right? Like I said, football suffers from sins of omission. So if we can't change the real world, maybe we could change the virtual one, right? And start creating a world where we're getting exposed to some of the things that we'd like to see in some of those storylines that don't yet exist in society. But then you've kind of got to push-pull, right? Because if you've got it in the video game, then people start wondering, well, when is it going to happen in real life? And could it happen in real life? And you start having conversations that weren't being had before. And also, you're growing up with a generation of girls who could finally see themselves in that game, and boys who they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to play shutdown defense, right? And Coach Jen's my coach. Like, I have people who are religious about team shutdown. They won't play with anybody but Coach Jen because mine is the best defense, right? That is straight up true. It has the highest rated defense. So if you are a defensive player and you play Superstar KO mode, you want my team. Or you just don't like women. I don't know. I mean, that's your fault. If you want to hurt your stats because you don't like women, then you deserve to get your butt kicked in video game. Okay? You just do. Because the stats don't lie, and it's a fast play mode. So if you get a turnover, you will probably win. But it's so funny because I know so many friends of mine who are like, yeah, you know, I was telling my son that I was gonna like, you know, talk to you or meet you, and I asked them if they knew you, and they're like, duh, she's in Madden. Like, they don't even know about the NFL, they just know about Madden. So you know, those kinds of conversations become very powerful because that visibility changes the mentality of everyone who interacts with that game, right? The little boys see that a coach could be a male or a female, right? And girls see that they could have a place in football, and they have permission to dream football in a way that I never did, because I didn't have somebody that I could look at and say, I want to be her. So that's where I got really intentional about trying to be more visible and more vocal, and to really be proactive in terms of not only, you know, myself, but using myself as an example for other people, because it's real world. So whether it's being out on the field with those girls and being that female role model that 7 out of 10 girls said that they did not have enough of, or pushing the needle on Madden so that in the first time in Madden 20, this is Madden 20, y'all, and it took that long to have a female in the game. We can't, I mean, it took longer to get it in the virtual world than the real world. Come on now. And yet they didn't even really realize it was a big deal. Yeah, like this is why diversity becomes so important, is because you have to have those people in the room to be able to have the conversation, right? Like everybody needs representation so that the conversation is rounded. And I mean, I don't care. Like I told somebody the other day, I said, I'm a great perspective. And he says, why? Because you're a woman? I'm like, no, because I'm short. I look at this kitchen in a whole different way than you do, because that shelf I will never get to. It is wasted on me. And he started laughing. I'm like, but that's what diversity is, right? Are we looking at it as short and tall, a big and small, a, you know, female, male? Like we need representation so that the facets of the conversation can be brought to light, right? All of the facets, all of the backgrounds, all of the experiences, and then the responsibility, if you are that person in the room, is to not lose your voice, because you see that too often, right? Like you might get one woman at the table, or one, you know, one person of color at the table, and then they don't speak. Well, that doesn't help, right? Like we have to be willing to have that voice. And then that also means if you are the person that's not in the minority, you need to be a good ally, and you need to be proactive. And we can very easily shut down some things that are not okay. And if you do that, you have to be willing to be that person. Because people who know me know that I will push for those things, and I will stand on the table for them. Which means that some people won't always like you for it. That means that sometimes you will open doors that you are not allowed to walk through, because you were the person who opened them and it made other people angry, right? And that is something I've had to live with many times, right? Realizing that you are opening a door that you will not be able to walk through because you were the one who opened the door. And yet I'll still stand on the table. And the good thing is that the scouting report will be relatively consistent. Meaning, if you were to ask people about me, you'll get relatively the same scouting report. Something's good, something's bad, right? Opinionated, will let you know, intelligent, very passionate, often takes on too much. You know, don't invite her in the conversation if you don't want an opinion. But if she doesn't know, she'll tell you that too, right? Like, and so if that's the person that you're looking for, you'll probably call me. If that's not the person that you're looking for, my phone will not ring, right? Because if you ask around, that's what you're going to hear. And once you develop a reputation like that, people know, because they've done their due diligence, that this is what they're going to get. And I don't really kind of know how to do it any other way, because I look at myself not as just a football person, but as someone who loves human puzzles. And I've been that way since a kid. Like if you gave me a puzzle or something that I had to be good at, like I was going to do it until it was done, right? Like video games, right? I remember getting Super Mario and I played until I beat it. And I was like, I'm done now. Like, this is boring. I know I can beat it. Like, why do I want to do this anymore? And so even in this time, right, that we're in right now, one of the things that I think is really, really important to realize is that there are big, big, big world problems, big ones. And yet every single one of us is a part of that solution, but it may not be the big problem that we're a part of the solution for. right? Other than staying at home and doing those things, right? It may be that your skill set could allow you to move needles in other ways, right? For a long time, you know, we had a lot of people sewing masks. I am not a sewer. If I were to attempt to sew masks, I would probably hurt people more than I would help them, okay? Because I'm not going to trust that that thing would hold up or it would hold anything out or the right things in, okay? It's not my skill set. But what am I good at? Taking complex problems and making them digestible. I have a background in play and drawing therapy. I've worked with kids. Gosh, I started babysitting in 7th grade, right? And I've always had a knack for them and I love them. I've counseled them on all levels. So when this pandemic hit, I had a lot of friends reach out. Like, oh, my kids are going crazy. They're like stuck inside. I don't know what to do. I get no break. And I was like, okay, no problem. I mean, I thought we were going to be quarantined at 2 weeks at that point, but you know, here we are. So I'm driving across country at that time. I had bought a place in LA at the end of February. Probably the worst time to buy and move across country. No problem. My stuff's packed up. It's supposed to be getting sent to LA. I was originally supposed to be doing all these things and flying in. Well, I could see the writing on the wall. The day that they did the whole cruise thing, like that horrible news came out and everybody said, whatever you do, don't get on a cruise. That came out the afternoon after I was supposed to get on a cruise that morning. And I was supposed to get on a cruise to speak and do all this stuff. And I was just like watching and I was like, mm-mm. And I was seeing so few people in masks and I just had a really bad feeling. And I'm not a fearful person, right? I played football against men. So not a lot scares me, but I was just feeling that this was going to get really bad. And I got to the ship. And I mean, it's a paid speaking engagement and it's like a dream come true. You want me to go to like the Virgin Islands and say like all this tropical wonderfulness and I'm getting paid to do it. And I get to the ship and I had flown from Dallas to Fort Lauderdale and it was like a 5 a.m. flight. And I was one of 2 people in a mask. And I had my hand sanitizer, everything. I'm like, ooh, y'all are not getting me with the punk. Like, ooh, I'm doing everything I can. I have my hoodie over my head. I'm like, don't come near me. But looking around and seeing that many people who are just not paying attention, I was like, this is gonna get bad. And I got to the cruise ship and they're telling me all their protocols and they're checking temperatures and they got hand sanitizer everywhere and I have my bag and I'm rolling up and I'm just looking around and I went, I don't know. And they asked me like 3 times, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you're okay? And the 3rd time I was like, no, I'm not okay. This is not fun. And I can't even be the person that you want because people are going to want to like, you know, I'm going to want to like hug them and like sign their books and no. And I didn't get on the cruise ship. And by the time I drove 3 hours home, it was everywhere. CDC said, whatever you do, do not get on a cruise ship. Everybody's blowing on my phone like, oh my God, you're not on that cruise, are you? And I was like, I didn't go. And they're like, what? And I was like, I know, I was scared. And they're like, well, you're right. It's like the one thing they said do not do. And I was like, oh. And so then I was supposed to originally fly to California. But the day of my flight was like when the president had announced that he was going to close down the US. So all of a sudden the airports were flooded with everyone that was everywhere. And they were like this to each other. And I was like, that's bad. That's not safe. That's not social distancing. And so I was going to lease a car when I got out here. So I decided instead I would lease one in Florida. My dad and I came up with the plan, leased it in Florida and drove in 3 days from Florida to LA. I stopped in Dallas to get my Chihuahua. That was the only stop really. I slept a couple hours in the car, but I was too nervous anyway. And I didn't want to stop because I was like, ugh. And so I get to California. My furniture can't be delivered. It's stuck in coronavirus purgatory. For 40 days, I had a table, a chair, and a blow-up mattress on the floor. Thankfully, some clothes, obviously, and other stuff that I had gotten out here before, but no furniture. And I was like, wow, this is being tested. And my entire revenue, everything that I did is in person. So speaking engagements, camps, all of that stuff went to zero. And I just kept thinking like, oh my gosh. And then in my head was like these kids, right? Like friends are like, oh my gosh, the kids are going crazy. I was like, just, that's fine. Get some painter's tape. I'll teach them agility stuff on the floor. Like I can help you guys out. At least you'll get a breather. And we kept talking about these kids, and I'm like voice texting my friend, Brooke Foley, like, what about stuff for kids and, all of this? And she was like, that's really good. And that's when we came up with Critter Fitter. And we have motion and emotion books that help kids. Just the other day, and one of them, this one actually, so we originally launched on Caribou for speed, so it was a digital platform. But people like tangible books. I do. I'm a sucker. I like books. But this one especially was special to me because we took the CDC guidelines and really put them in kid speak. Like we have our bug who delivers with touchless delivery, and my niece loves them because they're rhyme books, because it's got a rhyme, because that's more fun. But we put the ants are all the frontline workers, and it talks about wearing a mask says I love you, but it gets you through all of the things like that, you could spread the virus without even feeling sick. And I want to show one of my favorite images. Why I can't find it now. But it's been really a cool process. And we were the #1 new release in like bug and spiders the other day. And I was like, let's talk about #1s. I got a lot of interesting ones. First female to play running back men's pro football. First female to like coach in the NFL. #1 new release in bugs and spiders. What has this world come from? But that's kind of what it is when you're just a problem solver. But this might be my favorite scene. This is what we call like the epic bubble battle. And so you see the COVIDs are being defeated. They're like, no, not soap, no. And our little snail mail, sorry, it's reversed. Our little snail delivers the mail, right? And so he's frontline and he's got to be out of there. But you see, he comes through squeaky clean because he's washed the COVIDs away. And, just being able to like, put these things into kid speak is something that I was really proud of. Like, this is the scene before where he's trying to get attacked. And my niece, who was my market research, I was like reading to her. I was like, can you read this to me? Because she's 6 and she's a boss. Like, she totally would. And she was like, the virus is sneaky and clingy. Clingy. It wants to come in. It's very pesky. Ha. I want to sneak on your hands and clothes. Take me in through your mouth or nose. And it's like, boing, a mask. And like, just to be able to relate on that level and have the drawings be ones that kids could do. This is part of what I love about like the approachability that Brooke put into it, is that like any of the kids could, draw our spider or our fireflies, and the masks take like the hearts, and it's been such a fun process. But to me, this is what that mentality is, right? Like when you believe that there's something that you can do, it may not be what other people are looking at, right? Like everybody else was talking about, how do we get the PPE and developing a vaccine and doing these really big, huge things. Not my skill set. But kids, I was thinking about how all I could picture, right? And it's probably because, I'm short. And so I'm used to like always like looking up at other people. That's that 5'2" again. But all I could picture is like the adults looking out and like, oh my gosh, we have to change the world. And the little kid tugging at the shirt being like, wait, what's going on? I'm so confused. Why are you washing my hands like a million times? And why are you telling me to wear a mask? Because masks are typically villains, right? If you look at like how we train kids, right? Which a lot of the times are through exposure, right? We talk about sins of omission. Most good guys don't wear masks, right? So to be able to get the buy-in for kids to like want to be a part of this, which we all know, like if you're fighting to make sure your kid does this at all times, the second you look away, you're done, son, right? But if you can get them engaged to be a part of the solution, then it's a little different, right? So that's why it's like, oh, okay, so the takeaway is like, okay, like put your mask on and join with me, be a part of the ant army, right? Like, and then if they're not doing it, it's like, instead of being like, put that on, it's like, don't you want to be part of the ant army? Oh my gosh, like we can do this together. And it's always funny because one of my former teammates, I love her to death, Julie Shockley, we were fierce competitors for years and then became like the best of friends when we played on Team USA together. Like West Coast, I'm calling shocks, right? Like up in her, she used to play for Sacramento. And she messaged me one day and all she said was hashtag was like AWABA. And I was like, shocks, what's that? And she's like, another badass Welter adventure. She's like, kid, like no one else. It's like one adventure to the next for you. Like she's like, and I know some people would think it was, all over the place. And she's like, and I can watch your brain work. Like, what is the human problem? What are we looking at? And how can we all roll up our sleeves and jump in? And that's the fun part to me, right? Like, that's where it gets really cool. Can we take a complex subject and make it approachable? Whether it's, teaching zone coverage to the guys at Madden with pizza, right? Like it was cover 3 and like the weakness is the seams. So it's between 3 pieces of pizza. Now I got 2, where is it? In the middle, good. Well done, guys. You just learned zone coverage. Are we good? And they were like, well, why has nobody else done that? I'm like, I don't know, probably because they're not a woman and you don't have women in those conversations. We just like to make things simple. I can't tell you why they wouldn't do it. I can only say that this is how I do it. And it just so happened that we had pizza. Could have been anything, right? But the beauty of kind of seeing that is the interconnectivity, right? And it was also my strategy for being able to mentally take care of myself in a scary time, right? Because it is scary and it is a really tough time mentally to see your income go to 0 and you moved across country. And yes, I know people here, but you can't see them anyway, so it doesn't matter. And part of the reason you moved to LA is for the connections and the connectivity, and all of a sudden you're not allowed to connect with anybody. That's a lot, right? That's a whole lot. So for me, that comes down to what we teach in actually psychology. It's the zone, and in sports, it's what we try and get to, and that's really focusing on what's in your control. Not the last play, not the next play, not who's watching, not if the media is going to be there, not when we win this game, we do this. But right now, in this moment, what can I do, right? And where can I move the needle? And for me, that became, okay, I'm going to look at the kids and I'm just going to really be laser focused on this. And I'm going to devote an inordinate amount of time into getting really good at this, because not only will it help them, but helping them will help me through this. And that's a very human desire, right? To know that you can make a difference and you can be proactive and positive. And that is the advice I've given people all around the world now, is it's in this time, find micro wins, right? A micro win might be texting somebody that you care about and just checking on them, right? And it's not asking or pulling on somebody before you ask how they're doing. I can't complain relative to a whole lot of people. It's hard being by myself, but I consider myself extremely blessed. However, I have a big problem with anybody reaching out in this time frame for something without checking first and saying, are you okay, on a human level, right? We had the riots in the first night that was really bad in California. There were 6 helicopters that sounded like they were on my roof. Okay, that is inescapable, loud. I didn't feel threatened. It's loud though, and you can't go anywhere, right? Like, you're stuck and it feels terrible. It was so overwhelming that my poor Chihuahua had a really bad seizure. Like, it was intense. And I remember one of my friends reached out the next day and was like, hey, I need you to look at da 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 da, and can you give me an opinion on this? And I was like, how about you first ask me if I'm okay? Well, why wouldn't you be okay? With everything going on in the world right now, more than not, people are not okay. Humanity is the most important thing right now. Not jobs, not opportunities, not anything else. Moving the needle on a human level, right? In terms of social justice, in terms of, how we're being cared for, people eating, people losing their jobs. And you want a favor? And you didn't even bother to say, hey, okay, there were terrible riots in LA and you just moved out there and don't know anybody. Are you okay? Look, the human capacity of all of us is somewhere where you can always get a micro win. And also, you can figure out very quickly if someone is for you or if they want something from you. Because if you're not checking in on that person, don't check for what you can get from them. It's an insult. It's a good and fast way to get your number blocked. Because I can and do give to exhaustion, right? And yet the strongest among us are the ones who will not often ask for help and get the least amount of check-ins from other people. Because when they're hurting, they'll go to that person and ask for something. And I can tell you, we had 20 days straight of riots, all of which come somewhere in the vicinity of where I live. We had helicopters for 20 days straight. And I could count on 2 hands how many people checked on me. And yet I spend most of my time looking out for other people in the world and how I can move the needle for them. And so if you take just one thing from this, and I hope you take many, but if there's just one thing, humanity and the love of someone else. Right? That's what we do in football. We say we play bigger for someone else, right? Football, family, and faith. We do things on the football field for our sisters or the people that we love. Like, I've laid out and blocked people 3 times my size because it was I take her out or she takes my friend out. I'm gonna take her out every time. So find that something bigger, even if that something bigger is someone else. Check in. Hey, I was just thinking about you and I wanted you to know you're loved. That is a needle every one of us can move, right? Then, is there someone who needs help? Or do you have a unique skill set where you can give to someone else? Because if you're feeling bad, that psychological momentum of giving to someone else can pull you out of any depth. And you'll be surprised when you move one needle, how many more will move. I mean, Girls Night Online, you guys started this for the same reason, right? Had to do something, had to move the needle, wanted to help people in this time, and making sure that even if we were socially separate, we could be virtually connected, right? And all of us has a very distinct skill set in that we just have to be willing to tap into, right? And if each one of us looks for those ways that we can move the needle, and not for payback, but for that kind of mentality of pay it forward and the exponential good that can be created, right? Like my books, yes, you can buy them on Amazon, but we also made sure that they were available for free on Caribou. So anyone, anywhere in the world can read them and have a tool to go back to. And if you're, and so Caribou is a video conferencing app. So the cool thing about it is like you can FaceTime, but like as you do it, you can swipe through the book and see each other. So you can read with like somebody who's not close to you, right? Like I can read with my niece and nephew, or and it was really, really popular with deployed military and grandparents prior to this. And then all of the sudden with this, everybody's going, oh wait, that's really cool. I don't just have to FaceTime, like I can, you know, color or read or something like that. And Max, the founder of Caribou, she's a wonderful friend who I've known for a long time. And, you know, she was one of the people who reached out and was like, Coach, I need to get these kids to move. I don't want them just sitting there. And I know that you had always talked about writing kids' books. Can you help? And I was like, oh, now it's coming from many places. Now I have no out. Now I really must do it. But, you know, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of the world. And when you have problem-solving people, right? Like, I don't draw. I'm not an illustrator. And my friend Brooke, you know, she is a multi-award winning creative director. You don't usually get that kind of talent to like work on a project like this. And yet it was her feel good too, right? She was like, no, this is really a thing. Because for me, I was like, people are like, oh, but you wrote them. And I'm like, yeah, I've been writing forever. You might have had, I mean, they may have stayed in my notebooks, right? If it wasn't for another brilliant person saying, we could take these stories and make them into books that are really powerful. And, you know, it's that amplification of good and the interconnectivity of talents that really creates exponential growth. And it's so easy to feel like we're separated, which traditionally would mean not powerful, right? Like throughout society, one of the ways that the status quo has been maintained, or, you know, dictators have ruled, is to keep people separate, right? Because then you don't have this collective talent, you don't have this collective voice. And, you know, it's also what manipulative people do. They make you feel isolated and unsupported and try and knock your legs out from under your table one by one so you feel off balance, right? And so it's really challenging in a time where we are socially isolated to intentionally virtually connect, because there's so much power in the energy right now of people who want to do good. But for so many people, it's hard to know what to do or feel supported that you can do it, or we have such big ideas that it doesn't feel like any of it's manageable or possible. And so that's why I go back to like, where is that place that you can control? What is that talent that you have? And whether it's a micro win or a macro win, all of them matter, right? If you are a grandparent, I'm going to tell you right now, take your grandkids and read to them, and give their parents the opportunity to go get in a shower or do something. Like I had one of the reporters tell me that, because there's a read aloud of this book on Caribou right now, so we have 3. So there's 2 read alouds that I did, and she goes, "You're a miracle worker. My 4-year-old said nothing for 10 minutes. I'm thrilled," right? Those 10 minutes may be the like piece that somebody gets in their day. And that's so manageable. And it means so much, right? And all of us have the power to do something along those lines for someone. And that's, if we all start thinking that way, imagine how much better off we'll be.